Join us for lively discussion about the A-State community. Each week, we'll meet with a variety of faculty, staff, and students to discuss all things Arkansas State University. Live from the ASU-TV studios in the School of Media and Journalism, this is A-State Connections. And this is A-State Connections on KASU and ASU-TV. I'm Johnathan Reaves, News Director with KASU Public Radio and the host of A-State Connections, the radio show on KASU. Arkansas State University has gained recognition for its efforts to make alternative forms of transportation on campus easier. More people are walking, running, biking, or even skateboarding across campus. And A-State is making more trails available. We'll be talking about this and more with Arkansas State University's Chief Communications Officer, Dr. Bill Smith. Dr. Smith, thanks for joining us. Appreciate you.
Thank you for having me over, Jonathan.
Before we talk about this, I wanted to learn a little bit more about you and how you came to Arkansas State.
Well, I have spent quite some time in higher education. I started off at my alma mater, now known as the University of Louisiana in Monroe. Worked there for almost a decade, and then went over to the University of Arkansas for a while in athletics, went back to Louisiana at a university called Northwestern State, and then I've been almost 10 years here at Arkansas State.
Right, and so Arkansas State, I know in those years, has changed a lot, and especially in the way of getting around campus. Kind of tell us about the PAC paths that we have now, and we'll explain about that here in a little bit. But how did this whole process get started for looking at alternate forms of transportation?
You know, I think a lot of it goes back to decisions made even before the time that we're talking about, where presidents and chancellors made the very strategic decision to cut Caraway Road and to cut Aggie Road and stop having the campus be a drive-through campus. When you do that, you immediately are turning the heart of your campus into a pedestrian space and a mixed-use space. And I think that's the trend in universities across America, is to have that core of campus be a little quieter, a little more pastoral.
I know when people like myself, I graduated my first degree in '96, and I remember that area. And I imagine for some people, they're like, you know, I remember the days when we would drive through. What are the advantages for being able to make it more mixed use and to be able to take that drive-through area away? Because I know that it was something that some people were wondering about why the university would do that.
You know, I think it immediately makes your campus core a pedestrian campus core. And when you think about the large universities, the ones that you think of that have a lovely quad or a lovely fill-in-the-blank name for that green space in the middle of the campus, it's one that's not accessible by vehicles. You know, I think a really good example here on our campus is the space between nursing's 3 buildings and the student union, where the road is cut there. And many people said, why don't they open that back up? But watch the flow of traffic back and forth, of students walking back and forth, faculty and staff walking back and forth. And the more of that walking that happens, the more of a different scale of campus you have.
And also, it seems like it's a great way for conversations to take place, more collaborations, just ways of people just to kind of get together and gather, as opposed to being, you know, maybe kind of separated in a vehicle.
That's true. And I think when you look at a lot of the intentional decisions that have been made on our campus years ago in that aspect, you know, you sort of have a green space, quad space that's near the arch. And then you have another one that runs where old Caraway Road was, from Humanities down to Bookout Circle. And then you have one that's similar, maybe a little more paved, but I think there are plans in the future to do a little bit more in that landscape area that's between nursing and the union. You've got those opportunities to have spaces where people can just congregate. And you're right, it leads to a lot of community.
I want to talk about the numerous phases of the PAC paths and all that. For people who may not know what that is, can you explain what the PAC paths are and how they came to be?
So they really began before we started a lot of the intentional path building, in the ways that we were building our buildings. If you look outside of most of them, they have a 12 or wider foot sidewalk, which really can be a mixed-use path. So in many ways, we had the PAC paths, which, by the way, it's pedestrian and cyclist, so that's the cute PAC part of PAC paths. and you almost had a phase zero. And it was simply looking at the landscape that already existed, where there are 10 and 12-foot wide paths that could become shared use for people on bicycles or other wheeled vehicles and walkers. And then our campus roads with a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, which is really the gold standard around the country if you're wanting to try to mix types of transportation together. 20 and under is very safe for pedestrians if there should happen to be a crash. It's safer for people on bicycles or scooters or other wheeled vehicles. So you could have a lot of sharing of the roads. So bicycles share the roads with the cars, pedestrians share the paths with the cyclists. That was the starting point. So you get that system into place, and then through a series of grants that I think that's what you're more focused on there.
Right.
The university has been fortunate to receive 4 phases. 2 of them are complete, 1 of them is going out to bid, and 1 of them we just received. And they are building sort of the infrastructure that knits all of this together. You know, there's no need to build a trail in front of Humanities leading down to Bookout Circle because we already have a lovely brick pathway there. There's no need to build a trail between the arch and the business building because, again, we have parallel trails that run in front of the library. But parts of campus that did need that connection, like from the circle around to the library, from the library to the east side of campus. And now these next 2 phases will carry toward the north side of campus. You're beginning to see a campus loop that's purpose-built around the perimeter.
And how are those decisions for where the paths are laid, how are those decisions made?
Well, the campus has a planning committee and a master plan when it comes to pedestrian and cyclist accommodations. Bill Hall is another member of this group that's very influential in this, as well as facilities management. Of course, the chancellor and the cabinet would be involved. And it's all designed to try to maximize the grant we get and get the best bang for our buck in our trail construction.
When you take a look at down the road, and obviously this is going to be several more years in the making, but you know when there might be a plan when all of this loop would be completed? Possibly?
Well, we will be very close to complete when we finish the 4th phase. So, you know, if we want to go through the phases, the first phase began at the intersection of Marionberry and Aggie Road, goes to the west along Aggie, and then turns along University Loop, goes under the Marionberry overpass, and then ended behind the library. That was phase 1.
Right.
Phase 2, which just opened, and features some of the most modern, newest thinking nationwide on how you build a separated path. So that example will be used by other towns and cities and universities to design their what's called a cycle path. When you take a road that's too wide for the traffic that we have and turn part of it into a protected space. So it's not just in the campus core. You've got both the horizontal bollards and the vertical blocks on the ground to keep cars from coming into that space and provide safety to runners and riders. Of course, that begins behind the library, goes to the turn of U-Loop east and west, goes up toward Aggie Road, and then goes out toward the farm on the east side of the campus. That's a point at which, at some point in the future, we're hopeful that the City of Jonesboro will tie into that, so then the trails will continue, say, up to University Heights.
Yeah.
Phase 3 will take us from where it is now along Aggie Road north toward the arena near Alumni Drive. And then phase 4, in theory, will take us from Alumni Drive up to Johnson. That part's still in planning stage, but phase 3 has been designed and has been let.
How many miles are we talking about?
The total system right now is a little over 10 miles.
Wow.
We have a lot of pathway inside the campus. And there are other purpose-built parts, like, you know, the space behind Sorority Row. That long run was a purpose-built bike path. The intersection there behind the Welcome Center that runs along the Living Learning Communities was another purpose-built path. There are paths that extend into each of our living learning areas and little ways that you can jump on your bike, get into the core, and use the rest of the system. So it ends up being just a little over 10 miles today. Obviously, we're talking about 2 more phases to be added soon.
One of the things I want to ask about, and maybe something that obviously it's good for quality of life, it's good for health, it's good for those things. One area that I heard that it really does help in is attracting new people to campus. Kind of explain why that's important to be able to have all, over 10 miles of trails in Arkansas State for that particular purpose.
I think when you think about campus life these days, and especially with the generation of students that are coming up, they're really committed to a live, work, learn environment, play. They're not necessarily wanting to get in a car and go to the other side of town. They like to do these things inside a built environment. You see that with other developments that are happening in this area, and you certainly see it in larger cities across our region where more and more people are wanting to live in proximity to where they work, live in proximity to where they're going to play, and live in proximity to amenities that allow them to exercise or just go out and relax or walk the dog. And more cities across the country are adopting these type of standards. When you think about it, that's really what an American college campus always has been. Mm-hmm. So by having the PAC paths to knit it together, to give everyone a safe way of moving from one side of the campus to the other without having to get in a car and relocate to another side of campus, really helps enhance that environment.
And it's really cool to see so many people using them all the time.
I'm very thrilled with the way that people have adopted this phase 2 part on the south side of campus, and really the way the community has. It's the number of families I'm seeing out there now because they know they've got a reasonably flat, safe, and protected space that maybe they can bring the 9-year-old and the 5-year-old to ride bikes with mom and dad. And we're seeing more and more of that. And frankly, that's a role that we want to make very clear to the community. A lot of people look at our campus and they're occasionally intimidated by it. Oh, I don't know where to park. I don't know where to go. I'm a little confused because I can't drive through. We want more and more people to come onto campus and use our space. If you live in the eastern half of Jonesboro, the northern half of Jonesboro, there aren't a lot of parks in that part of town. We are your park. If you're wanting to go ride, run, walk, get out and just experience nature, that's what our trails are for, and we encourage that.
I think that's a good key because some people may think, well, that's just for Arkansas State University. But you're saying, and I agree with this is something that everyone could use. This is a public thing, not just a university thing.
We saw a great example of that when St. Bernard's brought back their breast cancer awareness event. For years it had been the Komen Run or the Komen Ride, and they brought it back as Pink Warrior. And you saw where St. Bernard's reached out to us, and the majority of that event happened on the PAC paths. They came across Marionberry, turned onto one half of the paths, came around Marionberry, went back across, and hundreds of community members were able to come out and get a taste of what it's like to use this space for, a special event. And we want those people to come back and continue to walk, ride, and roll on our PAC paths.
We're going to continue with this conversation coming up as Dr. Bill Smith is the Chief Communications Officer at Arkansas State University. We'll have more after this quick timeout. We'll be right back after this. This is A-State Connections.
ASU-TV, shows like Red Wolf Roundtable, ASU-TV News, Westside Football, and more. Gain real-life experience while doing what you love. Get involved with ASU-TV today.
Here to deliver the latest news on A-State sports, ranging from football, basketball, baseball, and more.
I'm your host, Tristan Harlan, alongside your other host, Cooper Melder.
Red Wolf Roundtable is your local sports source.
Tune in to Red Wolf Roundtable to get your fix on sports talk and news.
At Arkansas State, we want you to go. Go where learning soars, takes flight, and rockets ahead. Go for experiences, internships, and scholarships. We want you to go. Become A-State Maine. Are you ready to go? Go.astate.edu for details.
Live from the ASU-TV studios in the School of Media and Journalism, this is A-State Connections. And welcome back to A-State Connections on KASU and ASU-TV. We're continuing our conversation with Chief Communications Officer at Arkansas State, Dr. Bill Smith, about the PAC paths and also cycling on the A-State campus. Thanks for joining us here for this edition. And people just saw the video of what we were talking about before the break of how the community gets out and really can utilize the paths that are at Arkansas State.
You know, that was a great example in that Pink Warrior event that we talked about before the break, and people have now been able to see. You know, it shows how the community can come out and be a part of it. And while, yes, there's a lot of talk about, hey, you built bike trails, they're really multi-use paths. And they're really there for people that run, walk, or roll. One of my favorite shots that was in that package is a family, and one of the family members is in a wheelchair.
Yes.
And they're able to go across that bridge that's part of this. And you forget how important it is for people in mobility devices to have a good, safe space to be able to get out in the environment and have time as well. And we're really, really proud of that.
That's fantastic. For all of these efforts, I know Arkansas State has received awards and recognitions for this. Let's talk about this, especially one that's really prestigious from the League of American Bicyclists. Kind of tell us about this and how that started.
So the League is the oldest advocacy group in the country for cycling. It goes back to the 1800s, and the irony of all of America's highways, it began with what was then the League of American Wheelmen, and they were advocating for smooth roads for bicycles, not for cars. Eventually it became the highway system. So they have continued to try to promote safety and safe spaces for people to ride. And the program they have is bicycle friendly, and it could be a bicycle friendly community, bicycle friendly business, of course in our case, bicycle friendly university.
Right.
To earn that, you have to show outstanding programs in 5 different areas: education, enforcement, engineering, and I'm going to forget the other 2 E's as I'm sitting here, but you can't just say, have built a lot of trails. If you're not doing educational things, you're not going to get the qualification. If you're not doing enforcement things, you're not going to get the qualification. We're very proud of the fact that in the state of Arkansas, Arkansas State University was the very first bicycle-friendly university. And after our first 4-year period as a bronze member, we were promoted to silver. And then just recently, we were renewed for another 4 years as a bicycle-friendly university at the silver level. To kind of put it in perspective, nationwide, there are only 211 bicycle-friendly universities. And of those, only 67 are silver.
And Arkansas State's one of them.
And we are one of them.
Give me an example. You're talking about the educational component that is so important. Like, can you give us an example of how education, that education component in the designation at Arkansas State with this achievement?
Well, one of the things that we did a lot of, honestly, pre-COVID, and we'll be starting it again this coming spring, is providing classes in the League of American Bicyclists curriculum that's called Smart Cycling. You know, it teaches the basics of how you best interface with traffic if you're a bicyclist, what things to look out for, some safety techniques, and it has to be taught by what's called a league certified instructor, which I happen to be, and 3 other people in the community are. So, you know, you have to have a certain commitment to the curriculum and host these classes where there's, it's usually 3 to 4 hours of classroom and then 3 to 4 hours outdoors. So, you know, you're going to make an investment in learning some of the skills of the road and how to manage them.
Cycling is something that's not just done in the summertime or in certain points. It's done year-round.
Absolutely. And, you know, and there's nothing quite as fun as that, you know, that little bit of warmth that comes around sometimes by surprise in January and get out and get on your bike. So, you know, it is a year-round thing. And for some of us, it's a year-round commuting thing.
Yeah, but I want to ask about, so you've talked about safety, and that one of the issues is that you have drivers who may not know what to do, or maybe we need to have a refresher on how to keep cyclists safe. Can we talk about that part of that? Because I think that's extremely important, not just Just to, for cyclists that are around campus and all that, obviously they've got the paths, but just in general, when you're going around the community and you see cyclists, what should drivers do to keep everybody safe?
Well, I would tell you two things are very important in this space: predictability and courtesy. So let's talk about predictability.
Okay.
Something that we spend a lot of time in the smart cycling classes is teaching riders to be predictable. You ride with traffic. It is against the law to ride against traffic. It is also statistically more dangerous for you to ride against traffic. It's a myth that began in the 50s and the 60s in some PE classes where someone just sort of invented that you should be like a runner and watch the traffic coming towards you. When you think about it, drivers aren't looking for traffic against the flow. They're looking for traffic that's with the flow. So again, aside from the fact that it's illegal, we teach people to ride with traffic. If I'm riding with traffic now, as a driver comes upon me, they know I'm going in the same direction. I'm going to behave in certain ways. I'm not going to weave back and forth across the road. They know how to pass me. What panics a driver and is not healthy for anybody is when you come up on that road space where someone's riding against traffic, somebody's riding with traffic, and you're the person in the car and you're like, oh my gosh, what are they going to do? Because I'm driving a 2-ton weapon at this point. If I guess wrong, I could hit one of these two. And is the one that's coming against traffic going to go with traffic? Is the one that's going with traffic going to go to the other side to get away from me? If I go, and you see, it's that anxiousness. That's on the bike riding community to try to work on that. And if I could say anything to anybody, the more you can explain to people, number one, it's not legal. Number two, it's the most dangerous way to be riding.
Right.
And I'm going to give you an example of how that works. I unfortunately have a video that I play every time I teach the class about riding on sidewalks against traffic. You're now doing two big no-nos. When the car pulls out of the parking lot and they are going to turn right onto a major road, they're looking this way towards traffic. And here comes the bike rider right up at them. They're not turning around to look for somebody coming against traffic. They're worried about the traffic. They never see him and they run over him as they pull out because he rode right up under the car.
Right.
That's the predictability part. Now, the other half is this. If we're going to be very honest about it, we have a vast majority of people in our communities that are considerate and mindful of people on bikes. They know that there are people that's their main transportation. They give them a wide berth when they pass. It's a state law, you have to pass at least 3 feet away. But there are some that target cyclists, and they're out to get the cyclist and prove to them they don't need to be on the road even though they have a legal right to be on the road. It's a reality, and it's something that really limits cycling for many people because they're scared of that. They're scared of they're going to have that interaction that's going to end poorly. Here's the thing that I would urge drivers to think of. It applies to people walking as well. If you're driving in your car and you come upon a cyclist in the road, maybe you're going to have to wait 20, 30 seconds, maybe 45, till it's going to open up where you can pass them easily. Is that person's life worth 20, 30, 45 seconds as you rush by and knock them off the road? Or when you go to try to pass them, you're going to drive against traffic and cause an accident because you can't get back over in time. Is 30, 40 seconds worth their life? Same thing for people that have concerns about pedestrians. If you were driving and you were told, well, hey, I need you to make a 2-3 minute detour in your car to go from point A to point B, you're not going to do that. You're going to cut through. So when people say, oh, well, the pedestrian should walk that half mile to a stoplight, wait for the stoplight, cross the stoplight, walk the other half mile back down, you're asking that person to make a 5-minute detour that you would have never accepted if you were driving. Don't be surprised that they're going to go straight across the road.
Right.
So, we expect these perfect pedestrians and we expect these perfect cyclists who are just going to get out of the way when a lot of times that person's just trying to get to work, trying to get to a destination, and they want to get there alive. So the more that we're kind and considerate to everyone, it just works better for our communities.
Right. And I know that one of the things that Arkansas State is doing in providing these paths and these projects is to make everyone safer. And that are there, besides this, can you think of any other ways that Arkansas State is, looking at to maybe add more trails or to look at more ways. I mean, obviously Arkansas State's done a lot to be able to add 10 miles of trails there, but are there other things that people kind of look at by way of looking at the campus?
A thing that's very important that's underway on the campus right now is a study of our crosswalks. Because again, it's pedestrian and cyclists.
Right.
And we have had crashes involving pedestrians in our crosswalks. We have been blessed that we have not had a fatal one, but that has happened at other universities in our state. I know that we have contracted with engineering firms to analyze our crosswalks. People have noticed the new lighting projects that are happening on campus. We've had 2 phases of what's going to be, I believe, 6 total phases of new lighting on the entire campus space for safety and for security. But at our crosswalks, they're going to be beefing up the lighting there for, again, you mentioned it earlier, we're into standard time now, so it's dark at 5 when you go outside, and students are moving around campus a lot more in the dark until we get back to daylight savings time in the spring. So trying to improve the lighting all over campus, but particularly at our crosswalks, is something that's being really emphasized.
And once again, just be patient as people are going across and doing all that, and just a little bit of courtesy goes a long way.
Exactly. Really, if you can't wrap your head around the fact that it's the state law that you have to yield to somebody in a crosswalk, just be kind.
Yeah.
That's a great rule of thumb.
Right. So as we wrap this up, I want to thank you for being here today and telling people about the ways that the community can use this. Once again, not just the A-State community, but the public at large can use these PACs.
Exactly. And one of the resources that we have available at astate.edu/bike are maps of these routes. So if you and your family want to take a 1-mile walk, or say you are a employee and you'd like to know a 1-mile route in the middle of campus, we've got that marked for you. If you want to do a 5-kilometer training run, you can do that on the new first and second phases as well. If you like to follow a really complex map, we figured out a way you can do 10 kilometers, but there's a couple of switchbacks in there. That will clear up as we get the 3rd and 4th phases in place. But a really good 1-mile walk, and that 1-mile walk, I recommend that to anybody that's a fan of Arkansas State, because it's on the inner core of campus. You'll see Tiago, you'll see Hal, you'll see the arch, you'll see the library, you'll see the steel structure, all the things that, it's sort of like the A-State greatest hits on that 1-mile walk in the middle of campus.
Right, very good. Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate you. Anything else you'd like to add before we let you run?
Again, I just want to stress to everybody, the PAC paths are open to everyone in our community.
All right, very good. Well, that'll do it for this edition of A-State Connections. I want to thank my guest, Dr. Bill Smith. Also want to thank Instructor of Creative Media Production, Galen Perkins, and his amazing students who are always behind the scenes running the show. Thanks to engineers Derek Herring and Clayton Holderfield for their help. And also want to thank you for watching. And don't forget, A-State Connections is heard every Saturday morning at 11 on 91.9 FM KASU and streaming on the KASU mobile app. And I'll see you next time for another edition of A-State Connections on KASU and ASU-TV. So long, everyone.